Hello and welcome to another Trick. I am your host, Matt Brady. Joining me today is Alan Thomas. And Alan, today we are going to talk which Final Fantasy should you play first?
This is a pretty tough one because there's been so many remakes and there's more remakes on the way, but there's not really any news about any new one coming other than just old remakes.
Yeah, so I kind of just thought we're just going to dive right in. I kind of have like two or three I think would be a good place to start. And then I think what we should do is maybe kind of branch down like, okay, so if you start there, where should you kind of go? Because I definitely have a game that I think you should play pretty much last. Not anything, not in that game has nothing to do with quality. I just think it's kind of best if you play it, at least after having played some of the other ones.
Okay.
So I'm going to go ahead and toss it over to you. Which Final Fantasy do you think you should play first?
I would recommend Final Fantasy 2 or the real one 4. So I this was tough for me because I think that some of recently 10 and 12 have both been remade, and the remakes are both really high quality. Mm-hmm. But I feel like especially 12, it's a super difficult game, especially down the stretch at the end. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure if you were, especially if you are new to JRPGs, I don't know that one would really suit you. But the 2 and 2/4, we'll call it 4 from now on. It's not very difficult. Most of the game is fairly simple and straightforward, but you're going to get a bunch of characters, you're going to get a great story, and you're going to be introduced to the mechanics of that kind of game really smoothly.
Yeah, and with 4, you're getting a game that it's the beginning of the 16-bit era, so we're past the 8-bit era, and they've kind of branched it out a little bit.
Out 6 different ways you can play it, even in a 3D version now on the DS. So,
oh yeah, there's a 3DS version, and 4 is the one that has the sequel, doesn't it? Doesn't it have a sequel? It's like After Years or something.
Yeah, it has After Years. I don't think you need to play that.
Don't need to play that. Okay.
The story pretty much wraps itself up. That was just like money.
Okay, I was not expecting you to go there. Now I'm thinking about it. I'm like, wow, that actually is a really good. That is kind of a really good place to start. Okay, so after you played 4, where would you think you'd go next?
I think you could almost go anywhere from there. 4 isn't my all-time favorite, top 3. After that, it's tough because I would recommend 7 because it's the most iconic one, not my favorite one. But the problem is there's going to be a remake of that soon, so just wait and play the newest version of it.
Right.
And 9, I guess I would say maybe 9. 9 just came out with the HD remix of it.
Yeah, see, 9 is the game that I think you should play last.
You think so, huh?
Yeah, and I love 9. 9's my favorite of the main series. But I think 9 is best if you've played at least 1 through... or at least if you played a handful of the ones leading up to it. Because 9's like a tribute to the series. And so I think that like 9 is like, I think you would benefit more and you would enjoy 9 more having played some of the other games.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. That is not where I was expecting you to go at all. Wow. Okay. I kind of have, do you have any other ones first? I'll leave it. If you weren't starting with 4, where would you go?
I say that's tough. I think 4 is best. I guess you start at 1 because it's kind of where it all began. Yeah. It's another one it's relatively easy to there's not like a lot of things that you have to know or all that much you have to figure out, and you could play it a ton of different ways. Again, you can everywhere.
Yeah, 1 you can play the NES version, you could play the remastered like PlayStation and PSP versions, and then there's also the like Warriors of Light. Which is pretty much okay, wow. Okay, well, I would say, to me, I think if you wanted to jump into the Final Fantasy series, and I don't even think you'd have to play the like newer version of it. I think 10 is kind of the best place to jump in, simply because I think 10 is kind of the best. It's like the best middle of the road mechanically, because you still have like You have the 3 characters. You can swap in and out though, which is really interesting. But it's like newer. It has a voice acting, and so you can kind of then decide, okay, do I want to play another modern one, or do I want to kind of play a retro one? And so I don't know. I think 10's has a really good story, except for the end. The battle system is fun, and then I think because it's like a class-based battle system, like some of the other games that don't really have like class-based battle systems, like 7 and I guess you could 8 kind of doesn't. You can kind of like decide, oh, do I really like this? Do I not? And then after 10, I think, yeah, you make that kind of decision. And then I would kind of agree with you, maybe go back to like 4 or 6, like 4, 5, or 6. Or then maybe go right to like 15, which I think is also like a really good place to jump in, because 15's a lot of fun and it's the newest game, but just kind of know that 15's like totally different from the rest.
Yeah, it's totally different.
Yeah.
I could see that. I could see your arguments about putting 9 last, and I could see the arguments for 10 first. The reasons I would stay away from 10 is, even though the story does kind of end up being good, it's such a weird beginning. Early in the game, it's so weird.
For 10.
The first hour or hour and a half of the game is just like nothing makes sense at that point.
Yeah, where you're like running around Xanarkand and it's all destroyed, and then like, yeah. No, I got you. I got you there. Yeah, the only thing I say for 10 is it's I think mechanically it's kind of in the middle.
Sure.
Yeah. Games, let's kind of dive into games we don't think you should start with. So I guess for this I would kind of exclude 11 and 14, just because like they're MMOs and they are part of the main series, but like if that's your cup of tea, then go right ahead and play them. I haven't really played them, so I don't know if they're good or not. Maybe you'll like them. When I just think of the main series, I always kind of exclude them. Are
we including any other of the ancillary, like tactics or like advance or anything?
We can get to those. I think we'll stick with the main series. Let's just finish the main series, and then we'll jump into like broaden it to the entire spectrum. Because I think that actually would change where I think you should kind of go. I think games that I would not start with. It's tough because I think for a lot of people, like the newest Final Fantasy is their first. I don't think I would start with 13. As we always bash Final Fantasy 13. I just don't think 13 is a good. I think 13 you'll enjoy more if you've played a couple Final Fantasies.
You know kind of what you're getting into.
Yeah, you know what you're kind of getting into. Yeah. And I know that like and Final Fantasy 13, 2, and 3 are like not bad. I just think 13 is kind of a really odd one to get into, because especially if you're like new to RPGs, you're going to play it and you're going to start doing the auto battle and you're going to be like, okay, I thought it was more mechanical than this. And it's just not a very mechanical game. It's much more of, I would say, like a linear story driven game.
Right.
And so, yeah, I would just not start with 13.
I think that's the issue with 13 overall, is you could start with 13 and then you'd go play another one and be like, wow, this is so much better. Like, there's so much more I can do.
Yeah.
There's so much more depth. But then if you don't start with 13 and then you go to play 13 later, you'll just be like, wow, this is not
right.
Why did they draw back so many strong characteristics from the other games and take them out of this one? So 13 is a little weird in that way, that you could start with it and it will you. Whereas, like, I think that's why I didn't recommend to start with 6, because I think 6 would spoil you. Right. Like, 6 has so many good characteristics that if you went to other ones after 6, you would be like, why didn't they just do them all like this?
Yeah, and I think that like it's almost kind of like, in an odd way, like Pokemon, how you have like the generations where you have, like, okay, some of these games kind of go together. Where it's kind of like, I think you would appreciate 6 more having played maybe 4 and 5, because you get to see like 4, 5, and 6 are all really good, but like you get to see like 5 mechanically is better than 4, and 6 mechanically is better than 5, right? Like they build up, and I think the mechanics get better. And it's kind of like 7, 8, and 9. I think like if you play them in order, like if you play 7, 8, 9 in order, I think you're gonna really end up liking them more, like as that little trilogy, because I think like they're all different, but because they're all on like the PlayStation, they kind of all feel like closer together, I guess. Because like rarely do I actually really kind of say like, oh, I kind of like this final, like when I think of the Final Fantasy games, I kind of think of them as like separate from each other. But I think of them in like groups. I think of like 1 through 3 as its like own group, and then 4, 5, and 6 is its group, and 7, 8, and 9, and then like 10's its own thing, 12's its own thing, 13's kind of its own thing, and then like 15 is its own thing.
I could see that. I guess I also would not recommend it just because it's also so different. Like,
which one?
It doesn't, like 15. Like you're saying it. 15, 12, 13, and 10 kind of. I feel like 10 and 12 go together. I could see those kind of on the same spectrum, but definitely 13 and 15 are just there's such a big mechanical change from the rest of them.
I will say though, it is kind of interesting though if you were to play, say, 15, if you were to say play 15 and 13 together, like because they were like developed together.
Sure, 13 versus, yeah.
Thomas just messaged us. He's late to the podcast. I think we'll let him in. But because they were developed together, and so it is kind of interesting having played them and like knowing that they were developed at the same time. Like that's kind of an interesting thing. So if we were expand it, Alan, if you were expanded to the entire Final Fantasy realm, where do you think you would go?
I don't think it changes much where I would go. Tactics is like my second or third favorite of all of them. So I mean, definitely should play it, but I don't know that you should play it in any specific way. Like, it's as much. It's maybe a little more different than. Well, no, I would say it's not maybe as much different as 15, but it is. Right. It still has the classes, and 15 was kind of.
Yeah, I mean, so like, and then there's some of the other games like 10-2. Like 10-2 is like 10-2 is very, I would say it's pretty different than 10, right? Like 10-2, honestly, in terms of the battle system, I know people bash 10-2. That's because the story is kind of, very like J-pop. But the battle system is actually really fun, and like switching classes during battle is actually really cool and interesting. But like if you play that, like say you started with 10 and then you played 10-2 and you're like, I really like this like battle, like this class system, well then that could send you like a bunch of different ways, because like one has a kind of a cool class system where you just kind of pick at the beginning, and then Tactics has like a really cool class system where you're going through. So I think that it does kind of change. A lot of the mechanics are the same. They're just like spread out in different games. Like this game kind of has this mechanic, this game kind of has this mechanic, and they're just kind of spread out. So it ultimately, I think, kind of comes down to like, what mechanic do you like? Do you like very specific characters? Because like 9 has like, okay, you have like a mage, a knight, stuff like that.
Right.
Whereas 7 and 8, you can like be like, oh, I want this guy to do this and this guy to do this, and you can pick and choose and mix and match.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I'd say maybe that's the biggest separation between the games. Is in some of the games the characters are very specific. They're very specific classes themselves.
Right.
And in some of the games, it just kind of gives you a blank slate and lets you kind of pick the class for whatever you want or switch between them.
Yeah.
And so more of an old school, like pre-video game RPG situation where like everyone picks a class when they start,
yeah,
and they develop that tree, and then now in a lot of the games you kind of can change around and multi-class and all this stuff.
Yeah, well, like that's actually one of the, when Final Fantasy 13's battle system opens up, like towards the end, and you start fighting actually like harder bosses, and you have to do like the shifts during battle where you're more just kind of micromanaging like what classes you're in. Like it's actually kind of fun, but it's just so sparse that like it kind of you don't end up getting it as much.
I haven't played that far into 13.
That far into 13. Isn't 12 kind of like that? Isn't it like you can like pick your class?
12, I'm like most of the way through 12, and I just put it down like a month ago because the late dungeons get so difficult, and there's so many things that if you don't like use a guide, you just run into because they're there, but you're not really supposed to fight them. Yeah. And they kill you and you get mad and then you rage quit like I did. 12 has... Wow, I'm totally blanking. Zodiacs. 12 has Zodiacs. Yeah. So 12 has the Zodiac board. And in the remake, you get to pick 2 boards for the characters. So they don't change necessarily after you pick those. They kind of stay in their own group. But in the original... each one was already preset. They had their own, the way that they were built. And now you can build them any way you want with a combination of one other.
Okay. So it's kind of like 10, like, because 10 starts off and everyone's like in their own, like you have like the big sphere grid. But like,
and you can move around
as
to
you
the other areas.
As you progress, once you kind of get past that character's like own set, you can move them into somebody else's class. And then at the end, everyone's like everything.
Everyone's everything. This one isn't quite like that. I say that they did it in the remake didn't work that good because it in the old one each character had their personality and so you picked and you used the characters based kind of on that. But in this one, like it just felt like the characters didn't have as much personality, so you were just using whichever one you happened to pick the best board for.
Right.
And like you didn't necessarily switch them up that much. I don't know. I prefer the kind of built-in classes.
Yeah.
Like that's 6 and 4 are 2 of my favorites because each character has their own personality, and their personality is also sort of tied in with what their skill set is.
Right.
And I like that more.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons I like Final Fantasy IX.
Yes, true, absolutely.
Yeah, but my only issue with 9 in terms of the battle system is that a lot of the characters are kind of tied to each other. So you have like Vivi, who's the black mage, and like he's cool on his own, like he's a really good mage, but he's tied to Steiner because he gets like the magic sword, right? And so then like 3 of your spots are then immediately filled up. And then so like that's kind of one area I've always been like, like if I want to, you have to, like, you're pretty much stuck using both of those characters, and they're both great. And like every character in that game is great, but then you have like 2 summoners. And so it's kind of like, okay, do I want to go like with one or the other? And then you have like Armorant, who like, if you're going to like, you're just, it's kind of like you're just forced to.
I get what you're saying for sure. Yeah, it ties you into combinations because they're optimal,
right?
And it rather than just letting you
pick who you like. Yeah,
who you like. Yeah. So I guess the best thing about that in 12 is now you can play with whatever characters whose personalities you like the most because you can give them whatever board you want.
Yeah, which is another reason why I push 10 as a great place to start, because 10 you essentially play with everyone at once, because you're swapping in and out, so you can kind of try everyone and see what you like. And I think that's a cool place to start, because then you can kind of be like, oh, what character classes do I like, and it kind of sets you up like for down the road playing other JRPGs.
That's fair.
Or more Final Fantasies. Now, I will say with you, I do think we talked about tactics a little bit, but I want to go back to it. There are actually some pretty cool tie-ins in tactics. So like if you started with Final Fantasy VII, you can get Cloud in Final Fantasy Tactics, and Aerith or Aerith.
Aerith,
yeah. You can get her as well, which is kind of cool. And tactics, you like, I don't know, again with the class system, you can build your own class and stuff like that.
Yeah, you basically get a combined 2 classes and in each character, because you get the class that you currently have equipped, and then you get the skill set of one other class,
right?
As well as like you get to pick a counter and like a movement bonus, and these can be from any of the classes that you've enough to learn that skill from. So yeah, I would say it's probably the most customizable as far as like just how many different skills you can have, but still feel like the character is just like one character.
Yeah.
Whereas like you're saying in 10, it sort of just starts to feel like all of them are the same at the end because
you unlock everybody's. Yeah.
Because you moved all the way across the whole board.
And some character like Kamari doesn't even have his own grid. Kamari just like immediately jumps into like somebody else's grid. And so it's kind of like, okay, well, I don't really need like 2 of these and stuff like that. And then once you get Orin, like you have Orin and Kamari, and they're both kind of like the same thing. They're meant to take on big guys. I was like, do I really need both of them in my party at the same time? Like, yeah. So you do tend to run into that down the road.
Yeah, and I mean, certainly there's still problems that you run into in 6 where you get a lot of choice and each character is different. There's definitely some characters that aren't as good as others, but they did I think probably the best mechanic in any of the games is how they make you split up parties. Yeah. Go through a dungeon using, like, at the end, you have to use 3 different parties.
Yeah.
And so almost every character has to be used, and you have to find, like, a way to complement their abilities in a party.
Yeah. Well,
definitely one way to do it. And that's nice.
Because I think with the exception of 15 in the main series, because 15 is the only game I can think of in the main series, or no, 15 and 1 are the only games in the main series where you have maybe 2, blanking on it right now, but where you have like 4 main characters and that's it.
Yeah, in 4 you don't pick who's in your party, but they switch out all throughout the game.
Right.
And then in 5, I think they switch a little bit, but not that much. 7 is all switching, and you get to choose the switches. So 6 was the first one, I think, to introduce you picking when they switched in and out.
Yeah.
Which I always loved.
And then in 10, you can swap out the main character. You can swap out Titus during battle.
Yeah,
so
that was another unique thing about 6 is it didn't really have a main character. Like, you could roll with whatever group you wanted most of the time. Sometimes it would lock in a specific character that was needed for that part of the story, but there wasn't necessarily a main character. You could look at it from Tifa's perspective or Locke's perspective.
So we talked about gameplay. Let's talk about story, because I think that it's kind of a interesting thing. So in the Final Fantasy series, there's a lot of different places you can start depending on what kind of, like, I guess, genre you're into.
Sure.
Like, one of the reasons I really like 9 is that 9, like, we went from 7, even kind of 6, you go from like 6 to 7 to 8, and those are all like
kind of steampunky,
like futuristic, dystopian futuristic. And then you go back to 9 and it's like classic, like knights, castles, and stuff like that. So there's a lot of different things you can pick, like what do you like? If you like the like old school, like I want, like, you know, knights and castles and stuff like that, you know, you can start go like 1, I mean, like 1 through 4, 5 as well.
Yeah, right? 5 too.
Yeah, so 1 through 5, and then if you kind of want this like more futuristic thing, you can go like 6, 7, 8. 10 is kind of a mix between the two in a way. Like 10 is basically like it was a futuristic society that like was using technology too much, and then like the gods, or what, I guess. The ending's so confusing, but like, you know, wipe it out, and then they get pushed back into like, you know, era with like knights ish, I guess. And then 13 is like J-pop future, and 15 is, I would say, like modern. I wouldn't say it's like futuristic, but I would say.
But even then, it still kind of falls into the same. It felt the most like 6 to me as far as story, because you had huge cities with like tons of technology. But then you also had just like the countryside. I mean, people drove in cars, but they still like lived in huts and raced chocobos in the forest and stuff. And there's still like ruins of old castles, and it was kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of a weird in between.
Yeah. Okay. So story. So if somebody was like, if somebody's like, I want the best story Final Fantasy has to offer, where would you tell them to start?
I would
should they start with the best story, or they should start with something that's good and then build up to the best?
So that's why I recommend they start with 4. 6 is hands down, in my opinion, the best game in all the ways. 4 is very, very good, but I don't think that you should start with the best one. People, a lot of times, if you start with the best one, I think that. Sorry to kind of jump back and forth, but I think that this is commonly displayed in the people who play 7 first think 7 is the best, and the people who play 6 first think 6 is the best.
Well, I have played 7 first, and while I like to play it more than 6, 6 is a better game. That's discussed. You can check out our Let's Rank Final Fantasy series where we give you the reasons behind that. Although we need to redo that and now add in 15, because I think that would kind of change the list.
It would change things up. Yeah, it would definitely fall somewhere.
Not the end, but it would yeah.
No, it wouldn't be at the end. It would be some debate as to where it went, but I think it would be interesting. But I don't think that you should start with necessarily the best one. I don't think you should start with 6 or 7 because I think both of those are so polarizing.
Yeah.
I think whoever you talk to, whichever one they liked for, they would probably tell you to play first. But I think that I would maybe definitely not play either of those first. 4 would be first.
Yeah, I would. Oh, you're breaking up there.
Oh, sorry. 4 was also the first one I ever played.
Yeah, I would. Story wise, I would say it. If you want like 9, again, I don't think you should start with 9, but 9 has like a pretty good story. It's like a safe story. It's nothing amazing. 15 story is like trash. And it's
especially Final Fantasy has a lot of bad endings, and that one is no exception.
Yeah, that one's no. 8 is kind of the story's kind of jumbled.
No, that's an understatement.
8 is such a weird game. I don't know if 8 would be a terrible place to start. It's like it's I want to say it's the most unique Final Fantasy, because it has just a weird battle system with like the draw system.
The draw system.
Yeah, the draw system where you have to like farm stuff. But yeah, I would say, 12 has a really good story. 12 also is like that MMO. So if you're coming from MMOs, might not be a bad.
12 story has been a bit of a struggle for me, having recently played most of the way through it. It just seems like
it
sort of feels like
grandiose.
15.
Yeah,
it is. It seems like they kind of give you little bits of it at a time. Like maybe there was supposed to be way more story, and they were just like, yeah, let's cut back on all this story and just give you little pieces at a time. Yeah. And 15 kind of felt like that too. Like you just kind of have all this space, and then there would be a whole bunch of story, and then a bunch of space, and then a whole bunch, and they would just cram it into like these little bits.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think you could start with 4 or 5, and then I'd go to 6. And for terms of story. Okay, so let's talk like extras. So what game is giving you like the biggest, like if you're really gonna dive into like a big game, like because some of them I think like Final Fantasy 9, I don't think like it's like a 40-hour RPG, but it's not really like there's a lot of mini games and stuff to do.
There's the card game. But
the card game's a joke. Like,
I mean, there's only 2 of them to choose from. I guess it's not better than 8's, but I don't know. I like
7. Like 7 has a ton of mini games.
Yeah, but they're pretty mini. I don't know. I guess
you have the race. You have like the racing game, the snowboarding.
The Jacobo racing is pretty. I guess that one's pretty in depth.
And there's the RTS mission, and like when you have to like drive around the submarine. There's a lot.
Yeah.
What? 1 second.
You broke everything, Matt.
I broke everything. No. Yeah. So there's a lot in 7. 15 just has like the racing again.
That one's really bland though.
Then you're just like monster hunting, but that's 15 is an action adventure though. So if you I guess if you kind of want like a different take on Final Fantasy.
I would say, I don't know. I think if you were going to dive into like the biggest one with the most extras, 12 doesn't really have that much extra. It's pretty linear.
Yeah.
I would say like either 7. I mean, I don't know. 7 have like the extra bosses you can go fight, but 6 has those too.
Right.
6 has extra bosses, and you can go make sure you get all the espers and make sure you recruit all the characters again, which you don't have to do. There's a bunch of items you can go after that you don't really have to go after.
Nope. It goes back to what I said where we should start. 10, because 10 has Blitzball.
10? Oh god. Yeah, Blitzball is pretty fun, but I mean, it's just a formula. I mean, once you know how to win, you just always win, though.
Yeah. Blitzball has you have like the Chocobo time trial.
I don't remember that one at all.
With Titus, where you have to like run through the hoops and stuff like that, and then you have like the Albed collecting, where you have to collect like the language and stuff like that.
I would still say that I think you're right that 7 has the most, like, outside of just the story of the game. It has a lot of shit to do, because there's the not just the Chocobo racing, but there's the breeding,
right? And
it gets you to go to special places, and you get the last summons.
Yeah, you have the golden saucer, all that stuff too.
Yeah.
But if you want the longest game, get the original, not the PSP version, but the PS1 version of Final Fantasy Tactics.
You can essentially play,
because some of those battles take like 40 minutes.
Yeah, and just even once you get deep into the game, the random battles are a pain in the butt.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think we've kind of burned through. Anything else? Any last things on where our jumbled mess of where we should start Final Fantasy?
No, maybe like a quick recap. So
I think we're both kind of in. I think we're both kind of saying maybe 4 or 10 is probably, I'm gonna say, the best place to start.
I think I'd agree with that.
Yeah, 4 or 10, and then it kind of depends on what you like. You really can't go wrong. I mean, even with like 13. I mean, I just think that some of the games I would wait to play. I would wait to play 13. I would wait to play 9 until you've dove into and I'd wait at least a couple games to play 6.
I would too.
Just that way you've kind of experienced some of the other games, and so you can kind of see like what the series has to offer. And then again, we kind of talked about like the generations. So like, hey, maybe you start with 1 and you're like, I'm just going to play through it. I think you'll really enjoy that building of like 1 to 6. Because it's like they just, I think they just get better as they push along. And then if you really dive into the series, go check out some of the other games like Tactics, and I mean the Tactics advanced games. Okay.
There's 2 of them. They're okay.
Yeah, they're okay. Like Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core is not bad for the PSP. I liked it. So there's so many games at this point. And then if you really like the music, you can check out on the DS the Theater Rhythm games.
Yeah, so, Theater Rhythm.
Yep, and Dissidia.
Dissidia's, yeah.
And there's a new one of those coming out too, I believe.
For PS4, I think now it's making its launch to PS4. Yeah, those were some interesting. And they're kind of more like fighting games. They're interesting. I played them on PSP.
Yeah. So okay. Well, I think that's our show for today. As always, you can find me pretty much anywhere on the internet at Super Games Bros. You can find Alan on the internet at his personal Facebook page.
You can also find me on Portland Dodgeball's
that's right,
YouTube page. Yeah, I run that. Yeah. So watch a bunch of dodgeball footage.
Yeah, and now for those of you checking us out on YouTube, as usual, we're now on Podbean, iTunes, Stitcher, iTunes, pretty much everywhere. But Podbean's pretty much where you can go and find us. That's probably the easiest way, Podbean or iTunes. Check out our Facebook page, facebook.com/BoxTrick. And as always, thanks for listening.